Sometimes artists, directors, or creatives in general will come out with a project that becomes a classic, and then they drop another thing after. That becomes a classic. But sometimes you have situations where they drop something back to back to back, 3 consecutive times, and all of them are classics. You may be familiar with the term three-peat when it comes to sports, when a team is able to win 3 consecutive championships. But a three-peat in entertainment and media, that's something pretty cool too. So I wanted to talk about some three-peats in music and movies that are really special to me, that I find really cool, because it doesn't really happen that often. When it comes to these things, it's more than just having a successful time, having these projects do well numbers-wise. It's about actually having consistent greatness between these 3 projects. Each one has to be able to deliver artistically and culturally on its own, but being able to do that consecutively is special. And I find this to be really rare because I feel like times when you almost think that there would have been a three-peat, there's some weak link, after the second one or after the first, but then the next 2 are pretty good. So being able to just have that back to back to back, it's good stuff. So I'm starting off with Tyler, the Creator's Igor, Call Me If You Get Lost, and Chromacopia. Honestly, Tyler has so many different 3 project runs that you could feature here, but I want to go with his most recent projects. Each one of these projects have its own unique sound, but all have a very developed, mastered sound from what he was doing when he first started. When Igor had came out, it really caught a lot of people off guard because of how polished it sounded. We kind of got bits and pieces of this in Flower Boy, but Igor's written really just kind of solidified this new sound almost that he was kind of doing. It won a Grammy, so that was pretty cool too. Then 2 years later, he comes out with Call Me If You Get Lost, which is just him flexing. A lot of just really, good rapping on that. And then that wins a Grammy too. And then now his most recent project, Chromacopia, comes out. And this is just still kind of what he was doing in both Igor and Call Me If You Get Lost, but then he kind of remixes that in its own way. There's a lot of similar sounds, at least to me, that I was able to hear from Igor that were on here, as well as that kind of rapping style that he was doing in Call Me If You Get Lost, where he just really just goes all out on this one. With this 3-album run, he really was able to just expand and build on that same sound that he was trying to do, and really just solidify himself as like a generational artist. No glazing, none of that, but from those earlier years to what he was putting out in these 3 albums, I think it's just really special, especially in recent years when it comes to hip hop, for example. A lot of these newer artists aren't doing a lot of fresh new stuff. It kind of just, they find a sound and keep it going. But I just feel like Tyler was able to take it to a different level when it comes to that type of stuff. Now moving on to my next one is Kendrick Lamar with Damn, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and GNX. And I know this one might sound surprising because a lot of people when it comes to Kendrick are gonna appreciate and favor his earlier works a little bit more, especially Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly. Those are some special ones. But this specific run to me was really special because Damn came out in 2017, and this is one of those albums that has some bangers, some good hits on there, good commercial success. He came out with another version where you can listen to it backwards. Like, there's a lot of just good stuff to this, and I do feel like this might be one of my favorite albums from him. And then all these years pass, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers comes out. It's kind of 2-album thing. I still feel like a lot of people are kind of conflicted about this. To me, this album was really special. I mean, it could have some bias with like kind of the time in my life and everything, but honestly, that's just how music is with anyone. You're always gonna have your own bias. But this one to me, I felt was really personal. So coming out with something like that after all these years of Damn, but then following that up with GNX is just wild. Because obviously, the whole Drake and Kendrick stuff happens. Then to go with all that and then just come out with this like little surprise album. This one he just had fun with. He has all of these smaller LA artists on here, just really kind of honing in on this West Coast sound. As I said, just to go from something so, I don't want to say Damn is like his magnum opus, because I wouldn't say that, but it's something so synonymous with Kendrick, to then to go to something so personal, to then fun. But like, when you step back and like look at all 3 of these, like these have some great stuff on all of them. Good storytelling, good lyrics, all, instrumentals, all that stuff is really good in this run. And it makes me really appreciate the fact that even though he still has those strong kind of respected albums from earlier on in his career, the fact that he's able to still keep up with the modern hip hop and do this type of stuff. And the last artist I'm gonna be talking about is Don Toliver, because Don Toliver was able to come out with Heaven or Hell, Life of a Don, and then Lovesick. And this is another one of those, I don't think a lot of people even appreciate this. I know he was already making music, but then he has his feature on Astroworld in 2018. 2019, he has No Idea, kind of become a big TikTok song. But to go from that and just kind of being this random artist to then dropping Heaven or Hell at the start of COVID, that just became kind of a COVID album, and that has some good stuff on there too. So this really just kind of put the world onto his kind of sound and everything. Then he comes out with Life of a Dawn a couple years later. I feel like Life of a Dawn is just a very smooth album. It's very nice. There's not a whole lot of features in there, but the features that are there, really, they add a lot too. And then a couple years later, Lovesick comes out, and this honestly might be my favorite from him. You have this kind of steady evolution where he's just trying to like morph into this, it's not quite like a Travis Scott sound. It's not really R&B. It's not really, I don't know what it is, but he really was able to find his own sound, and it works. It really works. Sometimes he gets deemed as like a feature artist, and these albums show that, if you really like him and want to get more into his stuff, these albums actually show the different sounds that he likes to do. I will always be a fan of people that can just really hone in on something and execute the idea that they want. And I feel like all these artists that I mentioned, Tyler, Kendrick, and now Don Toliver, they are able to really just do that. And doing that 3 times in a row is crazy, especially when there isn't really a connection between them. They still feel distinct and they can hold it on its own, but the fact that it was back to back to back. Now for movies, this is kind of interesting because I almost wanted to talk about Damien Chazelle, but I forgot that there was actually a 4th movie in the mix. He directed Whiplash, then La La Land, and then I was gonna talk about Babylon. However, First Man is kind of in between those, so unfortunately, that's not a 3-peat, but like I had to mention him because low-key that was the idea that came for this video here. But another director who's really been making an impact this past decade is Jordan Peele, because he came out with Get Out, Us, and Nope, and all of those are classics. I don't know, if you haven't seen any of these, you have to. All of these deal with so many different themes and they all work. You have the themes that are going to be more prevalent, in your face about stuff, but also those more subtle ones that, when you watch it again, you're like, wait a sec, like that's some good storytelling. He's one of those modern directors who are really changing how horror is in today's world. Being able to have social commentary and even some psychological stuff going on throughout what the characters are experiencing is really, really special. And honestly, Nope might be my favorite one of these 3, just because of how much is in it. I just feel like whenever there's any announcements about a new movie from Jordan Peele, I'm really excited because you kind of already know you're gonna get some good quality. It's not like you're gonna get some random Rush movie, some random one that he was part of. Like, this is like another one of his visions he wants to execute and put out into the world. And taking it back to the 90s, we have Quentin Tarantino with Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, and Kill Bill Volume 1. Obviously, he has a lot of praise to him because, what he was able to do for indie filmmaking in the 90s really changed some stuff around. And obviously he did have Reservoir Dogs prior to Pulp Fiction, but Pulp Fiction is where you really got to see what he was trying to do. Doing this kind of non-linear storytelling during this era was something different, as well as also with it being a lower budget movie. And then he did that again with Jackie Brown, and then did that again with Kill Bill. And you see just such a cool way of putting together a story, and all of the characters are really just packing a punch in every scene that they're in. And then, he sprinkles the little ways of paying homage to previous films. And this specific run to me is really cool because, as I said, this is a little bit earlier into his career, and I know a lot of his newer movies are ones that people care for more. I personally don't. I think these, some of his earlier stuff are better. And these 3 just are, once again, super unique, but it's a Tarantino movie when you're watching it. So that's gonna be it for directors. However, I did want to bring up Pixar, because I think it's really cool that they've had some interesting little 3 runs too. They went from Monsters Inc. to Finding Nemo to The Incredibles. And being able to do that with such different characters and stuff and making each story work. This is when Pixar had already come out with some stuff, and now they're really just doing what they want to do. So to me, that trio is special just because of kind of like that kind of childhood nostalgia I have with it. But then a whole decade later, you have WALL-E, Up, and then Toy Story 3. All 3 of those are a little bit more, I don't say mature necessarily, but there are some parts in those movies that obviously as a kid, if you're watching that, you're gonna enjoy it. But as you get older, like those deal with some interesting stuff. WALL-E deals with climate change and all of that. Up is dealing about grief. Toy Story 3, about leaving your friends. Like, I don't know, I just wanted to shed some light on those little trios right there, because especially in animated film studios, they're just pumping out stuff, especially nowadays. So being able to have a 3-run streak of films that just do really well, but like also resonate well with me, like that's cool. DreamWorks was another one that almost had something, but there's some rocky ones here and there. Let me know in the comments if any of these 3-peats are really cool ones to you as well, because once again, everyone's gonna have their own opinions when it comes to entertainment. And also let me know what your favorite 3-peats are, because I know there's so many other ones that I could have talked about that, once again, they may have not resonated with me, but they may have with you. I also thought about including some 3-track runs and albums, but maybe I'll save that for another video. Let me know if you want to see that too. If you enjoyed this video too, you can also help me with doing your own 3-run of actions by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks for watching.